This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about what's rapidly becoming my Bitcoin 2025 nightmare. But first I wanted to talk about an attack that is undergoing and being reported. As Charles reports here, there's a large-scale supply chain attack in progress. The NPM account of a reputable developer has been compromised. The affected packages have already been downloaded over 1 billion times, meaning that the entire JavaScript ecosystem may be at risk. The malicious payload works by silently swapping crypto addresses on the fly to steal funds. So if you use a hardware wallet, pay attention to every transaction before signing and you're safe. Make sure you look at the screen of your hardware wallet and trust what's on that rather than the screen of your computer. If you don't use a hardware wallet, refrain from making any on-chain transactions for now. This was from yesterday at about 10:48 a.m. What's NPM? It stands for Node Package Manager, the default package manager for the JavaScript runtime environment Node.js. BT Sessions has been doing good work on this. I haven't had a chance to dig deep into it, but you can look at what he's been talking about. It looks like Sparrow Wallet. The main things that we use on this channel and that I recommend to people: Sparrow Wallet, Cold Card, and Blockstream, the Blockstream app, and the Blockstream Jade hardware wallet itself. If you look at my Twitter account, my X account, you'll see I've reposted a couple things here where you can look at the actual products and see if you're affected. Blockstream app does not use JavaScript or NPM. Blockstream app and Blockstream Jade are unaffected. Cold Card is unaffected as well. And then I linked here as well to a video that BTC Sessions did that you can look up. For now, though, it's probably best until you make sure, it's best not to transact until you make sure that the products you're using are not vulnerable to this attack. So let's move on to the main topic of this video. In summary, this is what we've been covering: that Bitcoin Core devs are preparing to release a highly controversial and completely unnecessary software update. This is Bitcoin Core version 30 that ships with default settings that will automatically circulate high fidelity illicit material from one Bitcoin node to another Bitcoin node, helping this filth to find its way into blocks via a mining pool where it will remain forever. Now, when BSV, which is a failed fork of Bitcoin but shares a lot of similar code, when BSV made the same change to op return, blowing it open from 80 bytes to 100,000 bytes, actual CSAM was uploaded immediately. CSAM, of course, stands for Child Sexual Abuse Material, and I've attached this article about it. Here's a news article. After BSV node developers and miners lifted the op return data size limits to 100,000 bytes or 100 kilobytes, activity immediately took off. Among these posts was apparently a piece of illegal content involving alleged child exploitation material. So this is not just a theoretical attack for Bitcoin when it makes this change. This is something that is actually happening, and we're about 3 to 4 weeks from this happening on Bitcoin. And what am I hearing from most Bitcoiners, at least as represented on X? I would say deafening silence on this topic, or platitudes without context, talking about how Bitcoin is permissionless and filters don't work and filters are censorship and you can never completely stop spam, and that nobody's going to even use larger op returns because inscriptions are cheaper. And when you see these rationalizations, you know that the person hasn't dug in too deeply. And I don't really blame anyone because life is busy, but this is trying to raise the alarm bells, as many of you are, and there are people working on this, but I wish I was hearing a lot more noise about this. And all of this, these platitudes without context about how we want to keep Bitcoin censorship free, which is of course what we do want to do, but this has nothing to do with censorship. All of these sort of cheap rationalizations in the face of an actual case study with BSV that I just alluded to, where the CSAM appeared instantly after the op return filter was moved from 80 bytes to 100,000 bytes. Not enough people are speaking up, as I said, though some are. I wanted to play this clip from Simon Dixon that I thought was quite good.
And some people are speculating, well, is this an actual attack on the network? Now, if you were trying to attack the network, wouldn't you try and get control over the core team, the core developers, and try and see if you can attack that way? And so, that's the argument. You can pick what you want. Others, then they're saying that we'd like Bitcoin to be more than money. We'd like to be able to do these different types of NFTs and pictures and everything as well. But from my perspective, I think Core is playing with fire. And I'm skeptical about that as well. And the right way to be in Bitcoin is to always be skeptical, because people can be compromised. And this is not an attack on someone's ethics or morals. People can be ransomed. People can be paid off. And so when I see things like,
Those are great points he's making. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel. You can hit the subscribe button there, and you can follow him on X as well. I'll put links to all this in the description notes below. I really do appreciate Simon Dixon speaking up here, and I encourage you to listen to the whole thing. If you're finding this video interesting so far, I'll pause really briefly here to ask you to help to support this channel's mission. Hit the subscribe button. That does really help. Leave a like, leave a comment, question, suggestion for a future video, and share this video with a friend or family member. Now I wanted to talk about why 2025 is rapidly becoming such a nightmare for me. I've been speaking up about this attack on Bitcoin at great personal cost and reputational risk. I keep getting accused of being a spook or a pedophile, as are others like Bitcoin Mechanic and others who've been speaking up. So I can see why influencers, podcasters may be loath to cover this, but I also find it super depressing that so many of them are choosing instead to spend so much of their time on Bitcoin treasury companies when the underlying asset to those companies, Bitcoin itself, is undergoing what may turn out to be the worst attack in its history. This attack and what I've been covering on this channel, I believe, should be what's being covered on every Bitcoin-related channel and account 24/7. This is a crisis on the level of the block size wars, in my opinion. But because it's about mempool policy, which is a rather wonky thing, rather than consensus, no one seems to think it's that important, at least people who haven't done the work and looked into it. When you view this attempted change to Opportun in the context of the past few years of people trying to embed more and more non-monetary data into Bitcoin, like the inscriptions hack, which the Bitcoin Core devs have refused to fix, keeps leading me back to the same conclusion, which is summarized so well here, and which is also what Simon Dixon was talking about, who, as John Galt writes here, at this point it looks like a years-long, consistent, and well-designed attempt to sabotage the only lifeboat to exit the fiat system. I don't believe this is just unintentional sloppiness and ignorance. And I keep coming back to that conclusion as well. To be very, very clear here, like Simon Dixon, I'm not saying that all Bitcoin Core devs are compromised, and he was saying that you don't have to believe that either, or even that any are, though it's equally naive, I would say, to believe that a project as important as Bitcoin Core has not already been infiltrated by at least some Intel operatives. As Simon pointed out in that video, some or most Bitcoin Core devs could be being used by outside powers without knowing it. You just infect one influential dev with some really bad ideas and then have groupthink take over and spread the bad ideas. The thing that I keep coming back to, though, is the arrogance and disdain that some of these devs show to actual users of their software. People like Antoine saying, if all these LARPers were using Bitcoin as much as they virtue signal about it, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. And here he's calling out, of all people, Rockstar Dev, who's probably done more to spread Bitcoin, or as much to spread Bitcoin as anyone. As Samson responds to this, you cannot develop software for users that you despise. Developers of Bitcoin node software, whether NOTs or Core or other implementations, cannot successfully build software for a user base that they hate and look down upon. Regardless of how dumb the devs think users are, they can easily sense the utter contempt. That is, users like you and me can sense the contempt. Whether it be branding their nodes as fake, telling them they don't matter, DDoSing their nodes and laughing about it. Personally, I'll never touch a business run by someone like that, people like Rob Hamilton, or just generic insults, all these LARPers. It's all very appalling. I really agree with Samson there. Somehow we've ended up with node software developers that have both a God complex and a victim mentality at the same time. People that did so much for Bitcoin being accused of corruption. If Rockstar Dev hated BTC Pay servers, there's no way that BTC Pay would be where it is today. If I hated Aqua users, there's no way Aqua would be where it is today. If you want to work on Bitcoin, do it professionally and do it quietly. Don't make it all about yourself, and don't take out your frustrations on the users. And seriously, don't get angry if they don't want to run your software and then insult them for running something else. As Adam Back said, devs are supposed to be the stewards of the network. If you're really such a talented developer, then how come you're completely incapable of convincing people that your changes are good? If, as you think, the users are so stupid, why can't someone as smart as you are get the point across? If your motivations and ethics are being questioned, maybe think about why that is happening instead of lashing out. I repeat, you cannot develop software for users that you despise. Thought that was a great comment. And then I wanted to do a follow-up comment from Beauty on, and this is addressing more the area of talking about CSAM in this very sensitive area and whether this could end up hurting us. As I've mentioned before, this as an attack, CSAM and bad images, has been a theoretical attack that's been talked about and has actually been carried out in some cases. So this isn't new. This is something, as I mentioned in a previous video, Gavin Andreessen went to the CIA in 2011. So you can be sure these attacks have been well thought through, and we're not giving anyone ideas about how to do something that people already know how to do and that people did to BSV, as we were saying. But I thought Beautyon had a nice way of contextualizing this. He writes, right now, this debate is taking place in a very confined space with a small number of powerless participants, powerless in that they don't have access to the levers of the state. If this discussion escapes upwards to the people who do have access to the U.S. state and who are putting their money into Bitcoin and who are made to understand that a single individual who is not even an American, I'm not sure who he's referring to here, but it would be interesting to find out that a single individual who is not even an American has proposed a change that allows unfettered access for perverts to abuse Bitcoin, they will immediately see the threat and take drastic measures. That is, the federal government will. What those measures will be is uncertain, but you can be sure that they'll be wildly unpopular with just about everybody. And really, who can blame them? Why would anyone put up with this ridiculous, mind-blind, reckless, and unnecessary change to placate an atomically small number of people at a cost to literally everyone, but with no risk to themselves proportionately? These people think their needs and desire for petty satisfaction are more important than the needs of literally everyone on Earth. Proposing this change on the pretext that the limit is arbitrary, talking about op return, is completely irrational and creates the perfect pretext for the state to start regulating the deployment of new Bitcoin versions because Bitcoin is a national security asset. I have to say I'm rapidly running out of hope in terms of what we can get done before this change comes out. Again, I'm not running out of hope on Bitcoin. I haven't sold any. I'm not planning on selling. I think I'm one of those people who, if Bitcoin's going down to the bottom of the ocean, I'm going down with the ship. I'm certainly not going to sell. And we've had previous points in history during the fork wars, for example, when Bitcoin was actually appreciating in terms of fiat quite rapidly, even as the crisis accelerated. So I am rapidly running out of hope, though, that we can turn this around quickly enough. At this point, it's only really your moral support and these charts that are keeping me going, this chart of ocean hash increasing. Again, I don't work for them. I'm not compensated by them in any way. But this is one way we know that the solo miner and the solo block template creator revolution is taking off. And then, of course, Bitcoin nodes, Bitcoin NOTs nodes adoption. We're at 19% of the network, and people are still moving over to it. I think if we can get Bitcoin NOTs to 20% by October, when this new software release is coming out, when Bitcoin Core version 30 is supposedly going to be released, if we can get Bitcoin NOTs to 20% by then, and then keep most people from upgrading, persuading most people not to upgrade to Core 30, because of course people can run whatever software they want. But this is the argument I'm trying to make. If we can get NOTs to 20%, keep most people from upgrading to Core 30, we'll still have a lot of filters that are working on the network. In other words, those NOTs nodes plus old versions of Core that don't include this disastrous op return update. So if we take a look here at the top node versions, I'm on Clark Moody's Bitcoin dashboard, and here we have NOTs he shows it at 15% of the network. There are different ways of measuring this, but it's currently the third most popular implementation, second only to Bitcoin Core 28.1 and Core 29. But fortunately, if you start to add these up, we're a pretty good percentage of the network, and especially if not a lot of people upgrade to Bitcoin Core 30. And after hearing about this, I imagine a lot of people are going to be very hesitant and are going to move very slowly. And I know good conservative Bitcoin companies, they're usually running things one or two updates behind. So there is some hope here. Super Testnet had alleged that there was a sort of sybil attack using NOTs. In other words, people are spinning up nodes just to boost the account and not because they want to use it. As I've encouraged all of you on this channel, there's no need to run multiple NOTs nodes. Just run one node, really take care of it and use it for all your transactions, for sending and receiving and verifying, and also protecting the network by not relaying garbage. So Super Testnet was looking into some numbers. He had some concern that people were spinning up NOTs nodes just to sort of virtue signal. And then we got a great response from Start9 yesterday. From June 1st to September 8th, so just the last couple months, last 3 months, the period you identify as a possible sybil attack, total network nodes increased by 1,600. During this period, Start9 sold over 1,000 servers and observed about 2,000 new do-it-yourself instances. Bitcoin Core was downloaded, call it 2,200 times. Bitcoin Knots was downloaded 3,200 times. Download figures represent the aggregate of testing, upgrading, switching, and fresh installs. Based on these figures, we think it's safe to assume that StartOS added 1,500 to 2,000 new nodes to the Bitcoin network from June 1st to September 8th, with about 1,000 nodes swing in favor of Knots. This is further supported by the overwhelming feedback from users expressing interest in running Knots. So StartOS alone accounts for the chart above. So it looks like this is not a sybil attack going on. And if anything, the people who are doing the sybil attack would be on the Bitcoin Core side, because there's no longer a lot of organic support, certainly among the plebs and people paying attention for Bitcoin Core. So it's very unlikely that these would be the people spinning up new Bitcoin Core nodes to sort of boost the numbers. As Bitcoin Mechanic writes here, literally thousands of people have started running a node for the first time over the last few months. And that fact that it's predominantly a different implementation, namely Bitcoin Knots, is helping demonstrate an active network that will route around what it perceives to be damage. That's a really important point, that this is one of the ways that Bitcoin heals itself, and this is a reason itself to be optimistic that that network is routing around the damage that Bitcoin Core is causing. A lot of people keep looking at this through the fork wars lens, in which case nodes spun up for show to indicate wanting big blocks really were pointless. It's different now, even if you want to be pessimistic about it. Start9 and MyNode and things like ParmaNode, ParmaNots, stuff like this exists now so that the nodes are actually usable for stuff. The whole quote, is your node economic or not meme can finally die, because making your node quote unquote economic, if it's on Start9, means one click installing Lightning on top of it with a friendly UI to deposit funds and open a channel. So even if people are participating in sort of a sybil attack here, as they get used to their node and they start using it, the node can rapidly become an economic node. I think it's a really good point to make. This stuff didn't exist 8 years ago. The ecosystem has actually managed to make Bitcoin nodes usable finally. So that's the silver lining. So I'll conclude by noting that Bitcoin can survive almost any attack. What Bitcoin, I think, cannot survive is a complete deformation of its culture. If we lose the culture, we lose everything. Bitcoin's a monetary network. This is what the culture teaches us. It's not an unmoderated relay service for non-monetary data that may include malware, ransomware, and CSAM. And unless more people wake up really soon, I think we are going to have a major crisis on our hands that Bitcoin may not survive. It's all going to depend on how people play this. So please do everything you can to spread the word. At bare minimum, don't upgrade to Bitcoin Core 30 when it comes out, unless you want to participate in possibly relaying CSAM around the network. Even better, spin up a Bitcoin Knots node. This will help to send that message to Core, but it will also protect you as a node runner from having to relay unconfirmed transactions that contain CSAM and other horrible things. So I'll put a link to some references, some resources in the description notes below to this video. Here's how to run Bitcoin Knots, and here are a number of free ways, also a number of ways to buy or build your own personal server to run it on. You can buy one of them from Start9. Again, none of these companies are compensating me in any way to promote their products. I just want to get as many people either staying at Bitcoin Core 29 or running a Bitcoin Knots node. I think that's extremely important for the coming weeks. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.